So we're back with another episode, and today I just want to talk about a slightly quicker, less longer video about I think the three most common mistakes that students make in their profile and in their activities section. So the first is actually this is unfortunately it's a very crude slideshow that I made. Initially, I wanted to do this just in a pure audio form, but I feel like they're having some photos to represent what I'm talking about might be a bit easier for others to follow. So mistake number one is no cohesion with your intended major and activities. I think a lot of students they like to list whatever they want to list and put whatever major they want to put because the common idea is we want to be ourselves in the application. And while that might be true, you only can do that to a very certain extent. And so in this example, I just put together two photos. The first is this student with activities. I just quickly made up some activities just to show you. But the first is, let's just say you're a researcher at your school's chemistry club, and you did you completed chemistry research. Maybe it was like the effect of iodine on starch concentrations or the rate of reaction in the iodine clock experiment, or it can be the dissolving rate of caffeine, which is something that I did for my chemistry IA. So sorry about that. um how does that chemistry club link to the example that I've shown you here, which is, let's just say, you heard the advice from other people that, okay, you need to pick a major that's underrepresented, and then you pick folklore and mythology. This is you will instantly get rejected if you do this. It's very clear that you're not interested in folklore and mythology or astrophysics or comparative literature. It's very clear that you're a STEM student. I'm not saying that don't put chemistry club if you have folklore and mythology. I think you can, but definitely not in your first three activities. So, oh yeah, so I forgot to mention, but this is also the first three activities. So imagine your first three activities is chemistry club, and your intended major is folklore and mythology. You are gonna get rejected outright. Schools like to always say you can list whatever you're interested in, but you need to have a cohesive narrative. You need to have things that align, because having a cohesive narrative is it creates a good predictive picture of the type of student that you're going to be at the school. And it's also very disingenuous if you decide to put folklore and mythology, and clearly your extracurriculars do not point to that. The next is very common. It's always a business internship. Okay, the only reason why I put Morgan Stanley is because I've been watching this guy. He always says a Morgan Stanley internship, and he always talks to this imaginary person called Constance. So yeah, that's why I put Morgan Stanley. But a lot of students also have business internships or just internships in general. I think pre-law internships are fine because at least they're sort of career oriented. But business internships is very hard to justify unless it's unless this business internship is a non-profit. But if it's just those normal business internships, for example, you're a training intern at some firm, or the worst, and I've seen this before, is you're a business intern at Morgan Stanley and your dad is the managing director of Morgan Stanley. It's it has no link to your intended major, assuming that your intended major is not in business. And I think another point is that a lot of schools don't really have a business school, and if they do, it's always more competitive. So it's if you have a business internship and you're applying to chemistry, biophysics, even econs, it doesn't really make sense. And it also signals privilege depending on the firm that you work in. Even though it sounds very nice, oh, I had a Morgan Stanley internship before my college in high school. You tell it to all your friends, but in the admissions office, the way that they view it is that it is a signal of privilege. And not to say that you can't, but I think that you really need to be very careful. At the end of the day, these are not hard rules, hard and fast rules. I just want to make this clear. This is just giving you an example. You know, if you are doing a business internship, you help the audit department of Morgan Stanley read and process files relating to mergers and acquisitions. How does that link to astrophysics? How does that link to comparative literature? You know, it doesn't. Perhaps one thing is that you can find a way. You know, maybe you talk about how like you were a translator at Morgan Stanley and like you had to translate between languages. You helped out the language department of Morgan Stanley to read and process files and translate between English and Chinese. So then you want to learn like the literature and like things like about languages. By all means, you see, it depends on how you spit this. So don't think of it as like, you know, you can't do a business initiative. You can, but you really need to think creatively, at least get someone to help you to, in order how to position what you have to link to your intended major and your narrative. Another example that I have is usually like there's always some like performing arts in your school, like you did like a dance club, like a drama club. I was the vice president of the drama club for my school. And you know, you led the dance club and perform multiple times, and then your intended major is like comparative literature. Okay, I'm just going based off the three examples, but you can think of it as like chemistry, biology, physics. Dance club should not be in your top three activities if that's what you want to major in. Especially in the top and highly selective colleges, it signals very poorly on you that, you know, you're applying to your major. You should at least have three activities that link to your main field of study, but you put dance. It's like, do you not have any other better activities that provide that cohesive narrative, that academic narrative for you that links with your intended major? Because then that's a pretty red flag. So a lot of the time, a lot of people's activities, especially their first three, if it doesn't link to your field of study, it can really raise red flags. And it's not, and usually the activities list is something that admissions officers look at the start. And so it's like you don't want to start off on the bad foot. You want to start off with like the foot on the gas pedal. So let's just say you want to do like a comparative literature or like maybe okay, let me astrophysics major. You should start talking about how like maybe you were the head of like your physics club. You started your astronomy club at school. You developed like some telescope, some program to like vet through like telescope files to like I'm reminded of like that Johnny Harris video where like he had to take photo of a galaxy from like his backyard, and then he had to like he had to do like some like you take like you scan a patch of sky, and then you take like 50 pictures, and then after that you have to compile all these 50 pictures like together to get like an image of a galaxy. So maybe like you develop the software for that, like an optimization patch. You know, that you see that's unique because like not many people, you know, have done optimization for like a telescope, you know, or like a telescopic app. That's something very interesting, and that's where you really need to be very creative. And then maybe you can talk about how like you went for like this astrophysics conference, and then you presented like your findings, you presented your methodology, and then like you had like an astrophysics professor like hit you up. Okay, not in that way, but like who was very interested in your work, and then after you guys worked together to publish a research paper on like how like I don't know, like how the M81 pinwheel galaxy, you know, that there can be like fluctuations in its luminescence, and you're trying to analyze, you know, the cause of this fluctuation based on like your own software, you know, so something just really very creative. Like a lot of the things that I'm saying also just honestly comes off my ass, and that's what makes you interesting because it's stuff that they've never heard before. And it's like you know how like you see the memes of like, you know, this is like you have four original sentences remaining. You know, you should treat your application the same way. Try and make as many like original extracurriculars or like sentences as possible, because that's how you stand out in, you know, such a competitive applicant pool where, you know, only 1 in 25 get accepted in the regular round, 1 in 10 in the early round, I guess. So this is something that like you really have to like take note of. Okay, the next mistake is inefficient activity descriptors. I think th- I used myself as an example, and I just had like on the left side is like the NPC, and on the right side is like something that's good. But you don't have to follow me. um I just want to like there's no correct answer in college admissions, but just there's just some pointers that you should take note of to if you want to improve. Okay, the first is do not repeat your title and description. So I don't know if you can see on the second one on theatre and drama, I put vice president in school's drama club, and then I repeat vice president of the club. So this is something that you should never ever 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 do. You are wasting precious characters. I think it's like 150 characters. You've wasted almost 20% of your characters restating your position. I don't know. I've seen so many of like applications that do this consciously or unconsciously. It's like you've already stated the position, and usually this is a sign of like a student who is obsessed with position because even though he wrote it at the title, he decides to repeat it again. So it's like you see, what are you showing to the admissions officer that your title is the most important? But is it? No, it isn't. And what's worse is that you've already written your title. So do not repeat your title in your description. Another smaller example I gave is founder, service for kids, volunteered at a center for kids. Like, it's very clear that you're volunteering at a center for kids. You do not need to repeat this. Give the admissions officer things that you've never they probably haven't heard about before. Something that's new. Also, don't be too vague. Don't talk about like how you helped with school plays and backstage work, attended meetings. This is gosh, this is terrible. Like how did you help? You know, what did you help with? Can you specify it? What sort of school plays? What sort of backstage work? What elements did you help out with? The the worst is even worse is attended meetings. Like what meetings did you attend? What do you do in those meetings? Do you just sit in there and do nothing? Help new students. How? How do you help new students learn about the theatre club? Just say help new students and then specify how. Don't need to talk about, helping new students learn. Oh, of course, yeah, you're helping new students. But when you help new students, you're basically helping them to learn. So a lot of students run into this trap of like just having horrible activity descriptors that don't really shed light into their candidacy. Whereas on the other side, for example, I wrote Let Drama Bootcamp for 20 plus first years, oversaw props and practical effects module. Uh, sorry, just props and practical effects. Directed skits for 50 plus primary students. Initiated orientation module. Like you see, this is so much more specific. Like the admissions officer can see and can visualize, with numbers, like the effect that you had on your club and on the people that your club has impacted. You also should talk about how, for example, I gave a more nuanced point over here, which is that how like I mentored 5 used to lead their own asset-based sessions. So I think a lot of the mistake that a lot of people make is that as the founder, they always it's very clear that you're just making a non-profit and then you're gonna stop it right after. Admissions officers aren't privy like to this. They know like the strategy that kids play these days. So you do not want to send that signal. So how do you counteract the signal? You talk about how like you've already have a succession plan and based in your activity description. It can be something very brief, talking about how like you helped elect like the next president already and they're just waiting for you to like retire and then they will take over immediately. So this shows like you're genuine, like you really wanted to help to the point that you actually bothered to find a successor, to find a team that will come after you rather than just leaving it be, talking about your achievements. But then the because admissions officers have seen so many students with big achievements, big numbers, but not many would bother to talk about how they've shown commitment and they tried and they're trying to keep the organization running after they've left. So that's what sets you apart. The third mistake, oh god, and I'm gonna expose myself by showing my grades here, is not using the additional information section properly. Okay, sorry, this stick is in the way. Okay, I can't move this out. Yeah, okay. I don't think I can. Yeah, I can't full screen this also. Let me try it. Okay, I'll just leave it there. Never mind. The third mistake that students make is they don't use the additional information section properly. So what do I mean by that is that okay, as you can see, my grades were not so good. towards the end of like my year 6. Like you can see this like patch over here of like, 62 for econs, 54 for geog, 50 for langlit, 554. you know these are grades that are not so good, and if you're applying to top 20 colleges, they would question because they get, and this is mainly for international students. I think in America, having these sort of grades is like a very bad reflection on you, but in the international context, and I talked about this in my deep dive in my 2 hour long video, but I wrote about how like it's very normal in like in the Singaporean education system to have lower prelim exams, because it's very normal for like teachers to always set the papers at a much harder, so that like students would quote unquote like learn and like get shocked into studying. So I talked about how like this is very normal, and that I did pull up my grades all the way to the end. So please pay more attention to my final year grades. This is, yeah, I mean, you could say that this is excuse making, because then the question is, why not you just be better and get good grades for your prelims? But you have to deal with the facts, and you have to deal with the evidence that you're given. And remember, think of admissions as like a case trial. So this is what I discussed in my podcast. And you're on trial, so you got to mount a defense. If not, the prosecution will use these arguments against you. So you have to try and defend your case, and to at least help the admissions officer defend you by providing them with the information in the additional information section. So use this section to explain the weak parts of your application. Now, usually for most students, it's like their results, perhaps the lack of extracurricular activities or circumstances not reflected in the application that has affected them. I think life happens, you know. It's unfortunately like being able to properly explain yourself is not or having reasons why you don't have good results or like lack of extracurricular activities. It is not going to help you when it comes to highly selective admissions. Get in. But it more so like it mitigates the damage. So let's just say like your candidacy was at 80. After your flaws, you become a 60. But with this additional information section, like maybe you can become like a 70. So it doesn't help you, your additional information your additional information section, unless you've gone through like a very traumatic experience, it isn't going to wow the admissions officer, but it mitigates the damage that some parts of your application would have. And that requires you to very honestly audit your application and to single out like what are some of your mistakes and what are some of your weaknesses. And for me, it was my results. And also because I couldn't really change my results. I mean, nobody can. So this was the part that I mainly had to explain. And then in my additional information section, I also talked about like my other extracurriculars, like my like my part-time job working at like Shake Shack, Subway. So these are the extracurriculars are what I decided to use my additional information on. I think now with the with the additional information section being about 300 words, you can definitely be more concise, and like it cut down from 650 to 300. So I don't think it's that difficult to like use up the whole section, because your candidacy definitely has weaknesses, and if you think it doesn't, then think again, because it probably does. So then you have to look through and to really audit your candidacy and see what are some things that you can explain. And if you think your candidacy is all good, then talk about any additional extracurriculars that you have, because as for most high achieving students applying for top and highly selective colleges, honestly speaking, you will usually have more than 10 activities. And some of them won't make it into the final cut, but if you really feel strongly about it, you can add 1 or 2 in the additional information section. So for me, I had about like 15 activities that I wanted to put in, but I only could pick 10. And out of the remaining 5, I picked 2, which was like my part-time job and like my Coursera courses. So these were the 2 that I decided to add in my additional information section, as well as my explanation for my poor results. So that's going to be it for today's video. It's going to be a pretty short one. I just thought about this like on the bus, and I just wanted to address the profile first, because I think like this is the first thing that the admissions officers see, and so it's very important to paint a very good image of your candidacy here. So with that, that's the end of this quick episode, this quick video. Please email me at hello@elitecollegeadmissions.info if you have any questions, or just comment, and I'll try my best to help.